Before we begin, please be advised. This story delves into themes of mystery, psychological suspense, and generational trauma that some listeners may find intense. Listener discretion is advised. Imagine for a moment tracing your family tree. Not just names and dates, but the stories, the lives, the legacies. Most people find a few quirky ancestors, perhaps a distant relative who fought in a forgotten war, or a great-aunt who ran off with a circus performer. But what if instead you found a pattern? A chilling, inescapable echo stretching back centuries. A shadow that falls over your bloodline with terrifying precision. A loop from which no one, it seems, has ever truly escaped. Emily Hayes wasn't looking for a ghost story when she started her genealogy project. She was just a college student, procrastinating on a history paper, clicking through Ancestry.com on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Her grandmother, Martha, had always been vague about the family's past, often changing the subject with a nervous flutter of her hands whenever Emily asked about anything beyond her immediate parents. "Some things are best left undisturbed, dear," Martha would say, a strange, distant look in her eyes. Emily, being Emily, took that as an open invitation to disturb everything. She started with the usual suspects. Her great-grandparents, then their parents. The digital records unfolded like brittle, yellowed pages. Births, marriages, deaths. All fairly ordinary until she hit the early 20th century. Her great-great-uncle, Daniel Hayes, born in 1902, died in 1932, age 30. Cause of death: disappeared without a trace from the Blackwood Forest. Emily frowned. Blackwood Forest was just a few miles from their old family homestead, practically in her backyard. A common enough occurrence, she thought. People get lost in the wilderness. But then she clicked back another generation. Her great-great-grandfather, Arthur Hayes, born in 1870, died in 1900, age 30. Cause of death: presumed lost in the Blackwood Forest. Remains never recovered. A prickle of unease started at the back of Emily's neck. Two men, both dying at 30, both disappearing into the same stretch of woods. Coincidence? Maybe. The forest was dense, unforgiving. She kept digging, her fingers flying across the keyboard, a strange compulsion taking hold. Before Arthur, there was Robert Hayes, born in 1838, died in 1868, age 30. Cause of death: fell victim to the wilderness near Blackwood Forest. Body not found. Her breath hitched. 3 generations. 3 men. All firstborn sons, she noted, checking the family branches. All gone at the age of 30. All swallowed by the same cursed patch of land. This wasn't just a coincidence anymore. This was a pattern. A dark, terrifying, repeating pattern. Emily leaned closer to her laptop screen, the glow illuminating the growing dread in her eyes. The house was silent around her, the rain outside a soft, rhythmic patter that usually soothed her, but now only amplified the frantic beating of her heart. She scrolled further back, her fingers trembling slightly. John Hayes, born 1805, died 1835, age 30. Cause of death: vanished from the homestead, last seen entering the woods. Elias Hayes, born 1773, died 1803, age 30. Cause of death: lost to the wilds beyond the property line. The further back she went, the more vague the records became, but the core details remained terrifyingly consistent. Firstborn male, age 30, disappearance, Blackwood Forest. It was like a macabre poem, a haunting refrain echoing through the generations of her family. Emily felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. This wasn't just history, it felt like a prophecy. She looked at her own birth date, then at the date of her upcoming 30th birthday. It was still years away, but the number, the age, suddenly felt like a ticking clock. She remembered fragments of old family lore, hushed whispers from distant relatives at funerals, always dismissed as superstitious nonsense. Tales of the family curse, of the call of the woods, of the ones who never returned. Martha had always shut down those conversations immediately, her face paling, her lips pressed into a thin line. Now Emily understood why. Her grandmother wasn't just being dismissive, she was terrified. The records also mentioned something else, a recurring detail that sent a fresh wave of chills down Emily's spine. In the sparse police reports and local newspaper clippings she managed to unearth, there was always a mention of a peculiar symbol found near the last known location of each missing man. A symbol described variously as an intricate knot, a twisted serpent, or a spiral of thorns. No one had ever understood its meaning, or its connection to the disappearances. It was just a strange footnote, a bizarre detail in an already bizarre case. Emily pulled up an image of an ancient Celtic knotwork she'd studied in an art history class. It wasn't an exact match, but the description of an intricate knot resonated. Then she searched for twisted serpent symbol and spiral of thorns. Images flooded her screen, some ancient, some modern, some terrifyingly similar to the vague descriptions. What did it mean? Was it a cult? A serial killer targeting the Hayes family for centuries? That seemed impossible, absurd. Her mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. A shared mental illness, perhaps leading them to wander into the forest? But the record spoke of strong, healthy men, respected in their communities, often leaders. And the exact age every time? That defied all medical or psychological explanations. She thought of her father, Michael. He was the firstborn son of his generation. He had always been an adventurous man, a hiker, a lover of the outdoors. But he was well past 30. He was safe. Emily felt a brief surge of relief, only for it to be immediately crushed by a new, horrifying realization. Her father was not the firstborn son. He was the second. His older brother, David, had been born 2 years before him. And David had disappeared. Emily's memory, usually sharp, had a gaping hole where her Uncle David should have been. She had only ever known her father, Michael, and her Aunt Sarah. Whenever David was mentioned, it was always in hushed tones, a quick change of subject. Martha would get that same distant, pained look. Emily had always assumed he died young, tragically, but not mysteriously. Not like this. She went back to the digital records, her hands shaking so violently she almost dropped her laptop. She searched for David Hayes. Born 1968. Died 1998. Age 30. Cause of death presumed deceased. Disappeared from Blackwood Forest. No remains found. The air left Emily's lungs in a silent gasp. The loop. It hadn't stopped. Her own uncle, her father's brother, had been another victim. And the family, her grandmother, had tried to bury it, to forget it, to pretend it never happened. The symbol. She remembered a faded photograph in an old family album, a picture of her Uncle David as a child, standing in front of a gnarled oak tree near the edge of Blackwood Forest. He was holding something in his hand, something small and dark. It was blurry, but Emily could make out a faint, intricate pattern. A knot, a twisted serpent, a spiral of thorns. This wasn't just a historical curiosity. This was real. This was happening. And her family had been living with this shadow for generations, silently, fearfully, waiting for the next 30-year-old firstborn to vanish. Emily looked around her quiet living room, at the familiar walls, the comfortable furniture. Her home, which had always felt safe, now felt like a cage, a trap. She wasn't a firstborn son, but the pattern was so strong, so relentless. Who was next? Was the loop expanding, changing? Or was she, as a descendant, merely a witness doomed to watch it unfold again? A sudden sharp crack echoed from somewhere deep within the Blackwood Forest, carried on the wind through the falling rain. It wasn't thunder. Sounded like something breaking. A branch. Or something else. Emily froze, every nerve ending screaming. The forest, once a benign backdrop to her childhood, now loomed dark and ancient, a hungry entity waiting at the edge of their world. She felt an icy finger trace a path down her spine. The loop was real, and it was still turning. The icy finger tracing a path down her spine tightened its grip, radiating a chill that permeated Emily's very bones. The loop. It wasn't just a morbid family eccentricity or a collection of tragic coincidences. It was a tangible, terrifying force, an invisible noose tightening around their bloodline. She stumbled back from the desk, the old journal clattering to the floor, its brittle pages splayed open like a wounded bird. The scrawled warnings, the frantic pleas, the chilling parallels to her own grandmother's life. It all coalesced into a single horrifying truth. Her breath hitched. This wasn't some ancient, forgotten history. This was now. The forest, just beyond the window, seemed to inhale, a dark, breathing entity stretching its shadowy tendrils towards the house. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of the old wood, became a whisper of accusation, a harbinger of doom. Emily scrambled to retrieve the journal, her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped it again. She had to know more. She had to. But a deeper primal instinct urged her to flee, to burn the house down, to erase every trace of this insidious legacy. Yet, the same terrifying pull that had drawn her to the attic now compelled her to delve deeper into the abyss. She found herself back in the living room, the journal clutched against her chest, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Eleanor, her grandmother, sat motionless in her armchair, staring blankly at the unlit fireplace, her silhouette stark against the fading light. She looked ancient, fragile, a prisoner of her own memories. "Grandma!" Emily's voice was a ragged whisper, barely audible above the frantic thumping in her ears. Eleanor didn't respond, didn't even flinch. It was as if she were a statue, a monument to silent suffering. Emily took a shaky breath, forcing herself to articulate the unspeakable. "The journal. I found it. In the attic." Sarah's journal. A slow, deliberate turn of Eleanor's head. Her eyes, usually clouded with a distant sadness, now held a sharp, piercing clarity, like shards of ice. There was no surprise, no anger, only a profound, bottomless weariness. "Sarah," Eleanor murmured, the name a sigh escaping her lips. "My mother. Your great-grandmother." Her gaze drifted to the journal Emily held, a flicker of something akin to fear passing through her eyes. "She tried to warn us. She tried to fight it." Emily sank onto the worn rug at Eleanor's feet, the journal still pressed tight against her. "Fight what, Grandma? What is the loop?" Sarah wrote about it, about a recurring nightmare, a cycle of loss, and the forest. What happened to her? Eleanor's gaze sharpened, fixing on Emily. "The loop it's a curse, Emily. A shadow that clings to our bloodline, generation after generation. Takes. Always from the women. Always in the forest. Always when we least expect it." Her voice dropped to a guttural whisper. "And it always ends the same way. Disappearance. Despair. Silence." A cold dread seeped into Emily's chest, constricting her lungs. "But why us? Why our family?" Eleanor closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down a deep wrinkle on her cheek. "No one knows, child. Sarah spent her life trying to unravel it. Her mother before her, Rebecca, also tried. They believed it started with our ancestor, Ilara. She was an herbalist, a healer centuries ago. The stories say she made a pact, or perhaps broke one, with something ancient, something that dwells in those woods." Eleanor gestured vaguely towards the window. "Something that demands a price." "A price?" Emily repeated, her voice barely a breath. "What kind of price?" "Life," Eleanor stated, her voice devoid of emotion, like pronouncing a scientific fact. "A life every few generations. Always a woman. Always connected to the forest. A twisted echo of Ilara's power, or perhaps her transgression. Sarah believed it was a cosmic joke, a perversion of her ancestors' gift. A life given to the forest but not for healing. For consumption." The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Emily's mind raced, connecting the dots. Her grandmother's reclusive life, her mother's sudden unexplained move away from the family home, her own strange, unsettling dreams. It wasn't paranoia. It was survival. "Sarah, she disappeared too, didn't she?" Emily asked, the question a painful certainty. Eleanor nodded slowly, her eyes still closed. "She went into the forest just like the others, searching for answers, trying to break the cycle. She never came back. I was a young woman then, barely older than you. I saw the fear in her eyes, the desperation. I saw the forest call to her, and I saw it swallow her whole." Emily felt a wave of nausea wash over her. This wasn't some distant, abstract horror. This was real. This was their family's legacy, and she was standing right in the middle of it. "But what about you, Grandma? You're still here," Emily pressed, a desperate hope clinging to her words. Eleanor opened her eyes, a chillingly knowing look in their depths. "I survived, yes. But at what cost? I saw how it worked. I saw the patterns Sarah meticulously documented. I saw the signs. And I ran. I built these walls not just around this house but around my heart. I cut myself off from everything, everyone, hoping to starve the thing in the woods. To make myself small, insignificant, not worth taking." She paused, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "But the loop, it doesn't forget. It doesn't forgive. It just bides its time." "So you've been waiting?" Emily whispered, a new terrifying realization dawning on her. "Waiting for it to come for you? Or for someone else?" Eleanor's gaze drifted to Emily, a profound sadness mingling with the icy fear. I've been waiting for the signs, child. The whispers, the dreams, the pull of the forest. And when I couldn't fight it anymore, I just hoped it wouldn't be you. Emily recoiled as if struck. The implication was clear. Eleanor wasn't just a victim. She was a sentinel, a reluctant guardian, watching for the inevitable. And now, Emily was privy to the same terrifying knowledge. The journal, Emily said, her voice regaining a semblance of strength, fueled by a surge of defiant anger. It has to have more. Sarah wouldn't just document it. She'd look for a way out. A weakness. Eleanor shrugged, a gesture of resignation. She tried, Emily. Oh, how she tried. She believed there was a key, a specific combination of circumstances, or perhaps a ritual that could break the cycle. She even thought the timing was crucial. A particular lunar alignment. A specific date. Emily's eyes widened. A date. She remembered seeing several dates circled, underlined, and annotated with frantic notes. She flipped open the journal, her fingers trembling as she searched. The pages were filled with botanical sketches, astrological charts, cryptic symbols, and meticulous records of weather patterns and local events, all juxtaposed with increasingly desperate pleas and warnings. She found it, a page filled with frantic crosshatching. A single date circled no less than a dozen times, each circle darker and more emphatic than the last. Below it, scrawled in a shaky hand, were the words, asterisk, the veil thins. The debt comes due. The watcher awakens. Asterisk. The date. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her eyes darted to the calendar hanging on the kitchen wall, visible from where she sat. The date circled in Sarah's journal was next week, a mere 7 days away. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't just history. This wasn't just a curse. This was an impending catastrophe. Next week, Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Grandma, it's next week. This date, it's next week. Eleanor slowly turned her head, her eyes fixed on Emily, a chillingly calm acceptance settling over her features. Yes, I know. Her voice was flat, devoid of surprise. The signs have been growing stronger. The dreams, the whispers, the forest calling louder than ever before. I felt it coming. But what does it mean? Emily demanded, the fear threatening to overwhelm her. What happens next week? Eleanor's gaze intensified, her eyes locking onto Emily's, a profound warning in their depths. It means the loop is preparing to turn again, Emily. It means the forest will demand its due. And it means one of us will answer its call. A suffocating wave of terror washed over Emily. Her great-grandmother had disappeared. Her grandmother had spent a lifetime in terrified isolation. And now the date was fast approaching. The loop wasn't just a story etched in an old journal. It was a ticking clock. And she, Emily, was directly in its path. The ancient, hungry entity that lurked at the edge of their world was stirring, its gaze fixed on their bloodline. And for the first time, Emily understood the true weight of her grandmother's lifelong dread. The loop was real, and it was still turning. But this time it felt like it was turning specifically for her. The journal felt like a lead weight in Emily's lap, its pages still whispering the chilling echoes of Alara's despair. Her grandmother's words, the frantic warnings, the quiet, persistent dread that had always hung around Eleanor like a shroud, it all snapped into agonizing focus. The loop, it wasn't a metaphor, not a superstitious tale. It was a tangible, malevolent force, a spectral current dragging their bloodline through cycles of predetermined suffering. And now, its icy tendrils were reaching for her. A profound, bone-deep chill settled in Emily's chest, colder than any winter night. She reread the last entry, Alara's desperate plea for the next generation to break free, her agonizing realization of the trap she'd fallen into. Emily felt a horrifying kinship with this distant ancestor, a shared tremor of fear across centuries. She picked up her phone, her fingers fumbling with the keys, and called Eleanor. The ringing felt impossibly loud in the silent apartment, each chime a hammer blow against her fragile composure. Eleanor answered on the third ring, her voice raspy with sleep. Emily? Is everything all right, dear? It's late. Grandma. Emily's voice was barely a whisper, thick with unarticulated terror. I found it. The journal. Alara's journal. A sharp intake of breath on the other end. Then a long, heavy silence, punctuated only by Eleanor's shallow breathing. Emily could almost feel the weight of generations pressing down on her grandmother through the phone line. You read it. It wasn't a question. Everything, Emily confirmed, her voice gaining a desperate edge. Grandma, what is this? The loop? What does it mean? Why didn't you tell me everything? Come over, Eleanor said, her voice now devoid of sleepiness, replaced by a weary urgency. Come now. We need to talk. All of it. Emily didn't hesitate. She threw on a jacket, the journal clutched tight in her hand, and practically ran to Eleanor's small familiar house. The porch light was already on, a beacon in the oppressive darkness. Eleanor opened the door before Emily even reached it, her face pale and etched with an ancient sorrow. She looked older, frielier than Emily had ever seen her, as if the very mention of the loop had aged her half a decade in minutes. They sat in the quiet living room, the only light coming from a single lamp, casting long dancing shadows that seemed to morph into grasping hands. Emily laid the journal on the coffee table between them, its worn leather cover a stark contrast to the modern world outside. I tried to protect you, Emily, Eleanor began, her voice hoarse, her gaze fixed on the journal as if it were a venomous snake. I tried to keep it buried, to pretend it was just an old story of family eccentricity. But I always knew it would find its way back. What is it, Grandma? Emily pressed, her heart thudding against her ribs. What is the loop? Alara wrote about a choice, a betrayal. Is that what it always is? Eleanor sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. It's more insidious than just a choice, dear. It's a pattern, a temptation specifically crafted for each woman in our direct line, appearing at a vulnerable moment, a chance to gain something extraordinary, something you desperately desire, but at a terrible price. And if you take it, you repeat Alara's mistake. You betray someone you love, or you sacrifice your own soul. And the consequences ripple through generations, ensuring the next woman faces her own, twisted version of the same choice. So it's a curse? Emily whispered, the word feeling too small for the vast horror she was beginning to comprehend. A debt, Eleanor corrected, her eyes filled with a distant, haunted look. A debt Alara incurred. She yearned for power, for recognition, for a life beyond the confines of her time. And she was offered it, by something ancient, something that dwells in the shadows between worlds. But the price was her love, her family, her very essence. And now, every woman after her, down to you, is presented with a similar bargain. The terms change, the faces change, but the core choice remains the same. The allure of forbidden gain, versus the sanctity of your true self, your true connections. Who else has faced it? Emily asked, her mind racing, connecting the dots of family history she'd always dismissed as misfortune. Mom? Aunt Carol? Eleanor flinched at the mention of her daughter, Jessica, Emily's mother. Your mother, she faced her choice in her early 30s. She was offered a professional opportunity that seemed too good to be true, a path to immense success. But it required her to actively undermine a close friend, to betray a trust, to step over someone she cared for deeply. She took it. And while she gained much in her career, she lost that friend and a part of herself. She became harder, more distant. That's why she dismisses all this as nonsense. She can't face what she did or the true cost. Emily remembered her mother's relentless ambition, the way she sometimes seemed to prioritize work above all else, the subtle coldness that had always separated her from true intimacy. It wasn't just personality, it was the loop. And Aunt Carol? Emily asked, dreading the answer. Carol, her mother's sister, had always been the black sheep, a free spirit who eventually vanished from their lives altogether. Eleanor had always just said Carol found herself somewhere far away. Eleanor's voice dropped to a near whisper. Carol, her choice came earlier. In her mid-20s. She was struggling, lost, feeling immense pressure to conform. She was offered a chance to escape, to reinvent herself completely, to shed all her burdens and obligations. But it meant abandoning everything she knew, everyone who loved her. She took it. She left without a word, changed her name, severed all ties. She believed she was free, but she wasn't. She's trapped in a different kind of loop now, a solitary existence, constantly running, constantly seeking something she can never truly find because she left her heart behind. Emily felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just a curse of bad luck. It was a curse of identity, of soul. It forced the women of her bloodline to become something less than themselves, to make choices that fundamentally altered their moral compass. So what happens to me? Emily asked, the question raw and desperate. When does it come? What will my choice be? Eleanor finally met Emily's gaze, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. I don't know the exact form it will take, dear. It appears when you are most vulnerable, when something you deeply desire seems just out of reach, and a shortcut is presented. It will feel like destiny, like the perfect solution, but it will always require a sacrifice of your integrity, a betrayal of your deepest values or someone you hold dear. And Alara's journal. It says that the loop grows stronger with each cycle, the choice is more tempting, the consequences more severe if you fail. You are the first in a long time who has known what it is. Perhaps that is your only chance. As if on cue, a faint scratching sound came from the attic above them. Emily jumped, her heart leaping into her throat. Eleanor merely closed her eyes, a look of profound weariness on her face. It knows you know, Eleanor murmured, her voice barely audible. It's stirring. It's always been watching, waiting. Now that you've read Alara's words, now that you understand, its gaze is fixed on you. The scratching stopped as suddenly as it began. The silence that followed was heavier, more oppressive than before. Emily felt an invisible presence in the room, a chilling awareness of being observed. It wasn't just the house, it was everywhere. Over the next few days, the feeling intensified. Emily would catch glimpses of movement in her peripheral vision. A shadow darting across a doorway, a flicker in the reflection of a window, gone before she could fully turn. Her sleep became restless, plagued by fragmented nightmares of an ancient, gnarled tree, its roots twisting like grasping fingers, and a woman's terrified scream echoing through an endless forest. One morning, she woke with a start, the vivid image of a single dark feather on her pillow. She knew with chilling certainty that it hadn't been there when she went to bed. It was long and iridescent, almost black, and felt unnaturally cold to the touch. It wasn't from any bird she knew. It felt ancient, ominous. She clutched the feather, her fingers trembling, a silent affirmation that the loop wasn't just a story. It was here. She started seeing patterns too. Small, seemingly insignificant coincidences that began to stack up. Her favorite coffee shop, which she'd visited daily for years, suddenly started playing unsettling, discordant classical music. The news reports on her morning commute seemed to focus disproportionately on stories of betrayal, of people making desperate choices for gain. Even her online ads seemed to subtly shift, showcasing things she secretly desired, things that felt just out of reach. Then came the email. It landed in her inbox unsolicited, from an unknown sender. The subject line simply read, "Opportunity beckons." Her heart hammered. She almost deleted it, remembering Eleanor's warnings, but a morbid curiosity, a terrifying pull held her back. She opened it. The email was short, cryptic, and incredibly specific to her current situation. It mentioned her recent struggles at work, her desire for a creative breakthrough, a chance to finally elevate her career beyond her current stagnant position. It offered a unique collaboration, a partnership with an anonymous, highly influential figure in her industry, promising unparalleled success, recognition, and financial freedom. But there was a catch subtly woven into the elegant prose. The collaboration required absolute secrecy, a complete severing of ties with her current professional network, and a willingness to redefine ethical boundaries. It felt like a direct answer to her deepest, most private professional anxieties. It was exactly what she yearned for, exactly what she had been dreaming of, and it felt profoundly wrong. Emily stared at the glowing screen, the words swirling before her eyes. This was it, her choice. The loop was tightening around her, its insidious whisper promising everything she desired, at a price she instinctively knew was too high. The dark feather on her desk seemed to pulse with a faint, malevolent energy. She felt the ancient presence in her apartment, watching, waiting for her answer. The bloodline that couldn't escape the loop. It had found her, and it was demanding its due. The air in Jessica's apartment grew heavy, thick with an unseen weight that pressed down on her chest, stealing her breath. Her eyes darted to the dark feather, its barbs no longer just a curiosity, but a menacing claw reaching out from an ancient past. It wasn't just on her desk, it was in her space, a sentinel of a truth she was desperate to deny. She snatched it up, the obsidian shaft surprisingly cold against her skin, a shiver tracing a path down her spine. This was a nightmare, a cruel hallucination brought on by stress and too many late nights. She needed to get rid of it. With a surge of adrenaline, Jessica threw open her apartment door, her hand trembling as she prepared to hurl the cursed feather into the hallway, away from her life, away from her sanity. But as her fingers tightened around it, a sharp, invisible force seemed to push back, a whisper of a warning echoing in her mind. You cannot escape what is already within. Her hand froze, the feather still clutched tight. She couldn't throw it away, not because she was physically restrained, but because an overwhelming sense of dread told her it would only make things worse. This wasn't just an object, it was a tether, and severing it felt like severing a vital, albeit terrifying, connection. She backed away from the door, closing it softly, as if not to disturb the unseen observer. The feather was back on her desk, seemingly of its own volition, nestled perfectly where it had been before. Jessica stared at it, her heart hammering against her ribs. She hadn't put it there. She knew she hadn't. A cold sweat broke out on her forehead. This was impossible. This was insane. For the next few hours she tried everything. She held the feather under running water, hoping to wash away its malevolent energy. It remained stubbornly dry, the water beating and rolling off its surface as if repelled. She wrapped it in a towel, then a plastic bag, and tried to bury it deep within her kitchen trash can, piling coffee grounds and old food scraps on top. When she returned to her living room, a faint, almost imperceptible scent of decay hung in the air, and there on her pillow lay the dark feather, pristine and undeniably present. Panic began to set in, a cold, suffocating blanket. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a hallucination. This was real, and it was relentless. The feeling of being watched intensified, a constant prickle on the back of her neck, a phantom breath against her ear. She started seeing shadows flicker at the edge of her vision, hearing whispers that dissolved into the hum of her refrigerator, feeling cold spots move through her apartment, even with the windows closed. Sleep became an impossible luxury. Every time she closed her eyes, the feather materialized in her mind, larger, darker, its barbs twisting into grotesque faces that silently screamed. She saw flashes of ancient symbols, felt the earth tremble beneath her, heard the mournful cries of a woman she didn't know, a woman with eyes that mirrored her own terror. Fragments of a recurring dream, or perhaps a memory that wasn't hers, began to surface. A circle of robed figures under a blood-red moon, a sacrifice, a binding oath, and a chilling voice whispering asterisk, the price must be paid generation after generation. Asterisk. This wasn't just about a feather anymore. It was about a legacy, a horrifying inheritance. The phrase, the bloodline that couldn't escape the loop, resonated with a terrifying clarity. Her bloodline. Her family. Was this why her grandmother Sarah had been so secretive, so haunted? Was this the reason for the unspoken anxieties that seemed to ripple through her family's history, dismissed as mere eccentricity? A desperate need for answers clawed at her. She couldn't run, she couldn't hide. She had to understand. Her gaze fell upon the old, leather-bound journal her grandmother had left her. She dismissed it as a collection of recipes and mundane notes, but now, a chilling intuition told her its true purpose. With trembling hands, she pulled it from the bottom drawer of her bedside table. The leather was worn smooth, the pages yellowed with age, smelling faintly of dried lavender and something else, something metallic like old blood. She flipped through the familiar pages, past recipes for apple pie and remedies for colds. Then, tucked between two pages, she found it. A folded, brittle piece of parchment, barely larger than her palm. It wasn't a recipe. It was a crude drawing, a symbol she recognized instantly from her nightmares. A coiled serpent devouring its own tail, the Ouroboros, but with a crucial difference. Within the serpent's loop, instead of emptiness, there was a stylized human figure, its arms outstretched in a posture of both offering and despair. And around the serpent, etched in what looked like faded red ink, were three names. The first name sent a jolt through her. Eleanor Vance. Eleanor, her great-great-grandmother. The one who had vanished without a trace, the family legend said. The second name was Sarah Miller, her grandmother. And the third, scrawled in a shaky, almost desperate hand, was Jessica Miller, her own name. Her breath hitched. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a dream. This was a ledger, a chilling record of a destiny. The red ink, it had to be blood. A chill colder than any she'd felt before wrapped around her. Not only was she part of this bloodline, she was explicitly named. She was next. Beneath the names, a single cryptic sentence was written in the same faded red, in a language she didn't recognize, but whose meaning seemed to penetrate her very bones. Eternum debitum sanguis pro sanguine, usque ad finem circuli. She didn't need a translation to understand the weight of those words. They felt ancient, binding, a decree from a time long past. She frantically searched online for the phrase, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The internet, usually a fount of information, yielded nothing direct. But similar Latin phrases began to appear: eternal debt, blood for blood. Until the end of the cycle, the pieces, disjointed and terrifying, began to click into place. The loop, the bloodline, the debt. Her family wasn't just haunted. They were cursed, bound to some ancient, terrible agreement. Eleanor had vanished. Sarah had lived a life of quiet desperation. And now Jessica. What had they paid? What was she expected to pay? The feather, the presents, the nightmares. They weren't just signs, they were summons. She remembered the fragments of the dream, the roped figures, the sacrifice, the binding oath. The Ouroboros symbol, the serpent devouring its tail, represented cycles, eternity, self-consumption. But with the human figure trapped inside, it was a cycle of sacrifice, a never-ending loop of payment. She looked at her own name, written in what she now knew to be blood, a signature on a contract she never agreed to. The sheer injustice of it, the horrifying helplessness, threatened to overwhelm her. But beneath the panic, a spark of defiance ignited. She wasn't Eleanor. She wasn't Sarah. She wouldn't simply disappear or live out her days in fear. She would fight. She had to. Her eyes swept over the journal again, searching for any other clues. The pages were mostly filled with mundane entries, but then she noticed something odd. Certain words scattered throughout the recipes and daily observations were underlined, not in ink, but pressed into the paper, almost invisible unless caught in the right light. A secret code, perhaps? A message from Sarah, hidden in plain sight? She began to transcribe them, her mind racing, connecting the disparate words. Asterisk summit, solstice, heat, beneath, hearth, old, oak. Asterisk, a jumble, but not entirely meaningless. Summit, solstice, heat, beneath, hearth, old, oak, sounded like directions, a location, a specific time. Her grandmother hadn't just endured. She had left breadcrumbs, a desperate attempt to guide Jessica, or perhaps warn her from beyond the grave. The weight of the feather on her desk, which she had almost forgotten in her frantic discovery, suddenly felt heavier, its presence more insistent. It wasn't just demanding its due. It was guiding her, pushing her toward whatever summit solstice key beneath hearth old oak meant. Fear still gnawed at her, a cold, persistent dread. But it was now tempered with a fierce resolve. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a detective, unraveling a generations-old mystery, a prisoner seeking a way out of her ancestral jail. If her grandmother had left a key, there had to be a lock. There had to be an escape. She had to find out what happened to Eleanor Vance. She had to understand the debt. And she had to break the loop before the ancient presence claimed her, just as it had claimed the others. The bloodline that couldn't escape the loop had found its most unwilling, yet perhaps its most determined participant. The game had changed, and Jessica was finally ready to play. The world fractured around her, not in a physical sense, but within the confines of her own mind. It was less a possession and more an absorption. A torrent of sensations, images, and forgotten knowledge surged through her, an ancient current flowing into a modern vessel. She felt the chill of damp earth, the scent of forgotten herbs, the echo of desperate whispers from centuries past. It wasn't just her memories anymore. It was a tapestry woven from the lives of every ancestor who had stood on this precipice, every soul tethered to this cursed lineage. The ancient presence wasn't a singular entity in the way she'd imagined a ghost or a demon. It was a force, an accumulation, a hungry void that fed on something specific within her bloodline, something that resonated with their unique genetic makeup, their inherent spark. This was the loop, not a repeating timeline but a repeating harvest. Each generation, a member of her bloodline, chosen or drawn, would reach a certain point, a certain age, a certain understanding, and then they would be claimed. Their energy, their essence, their very capacity for life, drawn into the insatiable maw of this ancient entity. And in doing so, they fueled its continued existence, its slow, inexorable growth. The game wasn't about escaping a location. It was about escaping a destiny. And Jessica, now privy to this terrifying truth, felt a cold fury ignite within her. She was not merely a victim. She was a conduit of centuries of stolen life, a vessel filled with the echoes of those who came before. And she would not let their sacrifices be in vain. She rose, her body feeling both heavy and impossibly light, as if gravity itself had redefined its pull. Her eyes, she knew, must hold a new depth, a clarity born of absolute terror and absolute resolve. The familiar surroundings of her apartment seemed alien, mundane. The petty worries of her old life, bills, work, relationships, were dust motes compared to the cosmic enormity of what she now faced. Her first instinct was to run, to scream, to deny this horrifying inheritance. But the ancient knowledge within her, the composite will of her ancestors, held her steady. They had tried running. They had tried screaming. They had failed. Her gaze fell upon the worn, leather-bound journal her grandmother, Sarah, had kept. It lay on her coffee table, an innocuous relic that now hummed with a different kind of energy. Before, it was a collection of cryptic ramblings, disjointed warnings. Now, through her newly opened perception, she saw the patterns, the hidden symbols, the desperate subtext. Sarah hadn't been mad. She had been fighting, trying to leave clues, trying to break through the veil of ignorance that protected the entity. Jessica picked it up, her fingers tracing the faded script. It wasn't just Sarah's voice she heard in her mind, but the voices of others, older, fainter, all whispering the same dire warnings, all pointing towards a singular, terrifying truth. The journal wasn't a comprehensive guide. It was a fragmented map, pieced together over generations. It spoke of a nexus point, a place where the veil between worlds was thin, where the ancient presence could draw its power most effectively. It mentioned a specific time, a celestial alignment, that coincided with the peak of its harvesting cycle. And most chillingly, it hinted at a guardian, not a protector but a willing servant, a human agent who, for reasons unknown, aided the entity in its grim work. This guardian, it seemed, was often someone close, someone trusted, someone who could manipulate the bloodline into the necessary circumstances. A cold dread seeped into Jessica's bones, colder than any fear she'd known. Someone close? Who? Her mind reeled through faces. Michael, her well-meaning but often distant cousin. Emily, her childhood friend who had always been a little too curious about her family history. Even her own father, whose sudden, inexplicable disappearance had always been shrouded in mystery. The thought was a poisoned dart, piercing the last vestiges of her normalcy. Could one of them be the guardian? Or had the role simply passed to another, unknown individual in the shadows? The journal also contained a series of coded entries, symbols that Jessica now instinctively understood. They weren't letters but rather a sequence of astrological markers, geographical coordinates, and what looked like a blueprint of some kind. A structure. A very old structure. The coordinates, when cross-referenced with satellite maps on her phone, pointed to a remote, overgrown parcel of land deep within the ancient forest that bordered the town, the very same forest where her father had vanished, and where the local legends of strange occurrences had always been whispered. The nexus point. This wasn't just a place. It was a machine, a spiritual engine designed to channel and amplify. And the blueprint, it wasn't for a building in the traditional sense, but for a configuration of standing stones, of ley lines, of precise geometric placements that focused the energy of the land, the stars, and the bloodline. It was a terrifyingly sophisticated system, hidden in plain sight, dismissed as mere natural formations or forgotten ruins. Jessica closed the journal, her mind racing. She had to go there, not just to investigate, but to understand the mechanism, to find its weakness. The game had indeed changed. She wasn't just trying to survive. She was trying to dismantle an ancient, cosmic horror. But she couldn't go in blind. The journal hinted at dangers, at traps, at illusions designed to lure and ensnare. She needed more. More specific knowledge, more concrete evidence, something to fight back with. Her thoughts turned to the various disappearances throughout her family history, the ones dismissed as accidents, runaways, or simple tragedies. Her great-aunt Eleanor, who vanished on a hiking trip decades ago. Her great-uncle Robert, who simply walked out of his life one day and was never seen again. Her father, David. They weren't random. They were all members of the bloodline. They were all claimed. And each instance, she now realized, had occurred around the same celestial alignment, the same cycle, though the exact timing could vary depending on the guardian's machinations. This guardian. The thought gnawed at her. Who could betray their own kin to such an entity? What could they gain? The journal offered no direct answers, only vague allusions to power and longevity, a twisted immortality granted by the ancient presence to its loyal servant. The idea that someone she might know, someone she might even trust, could be involved, was almost as horrifying as the entity itself. It meant the danger wasn't just external. It was insidious, woven into the very fabric of her relationships. She needed to find the guardian, and she needed to understand the presence's true nature, its ultimate goal, the harvesting of energy, the consumption of life force. For what purpose? Was it merely sustenance, or was it building towards something greater, something even more terrifying? The scale of this ancient evil was vast, stretching back further than recorded history, hidden in the shadows of human civilization. Jessica knew she couldn't face this alone, but who could she trust? Who would believe her? The very idea sounded like the ravings of a madwoman. Yet, the deep, resonant knowledge within her, the collective wisdom and terror of her ancestors, was undeniable. She was the latest link in a chain of victims, but she also carried the accumulated defiance of generations. She thought of Michael. He had always been skeptical, practical to a fault, but he was also fiercely loyal, and he had his own reasons to seek answers about their family's strange past, particularly regarding his own father's odd behavior before his eventual death, a death that now, through Jessica's new lens, seemed suspiciously timed. Perhaps Michael, despite his skepticism, could be convinced, or at least be a source of practical assistance. He was good with research, with finding obscure information. He had access to old family records, things that might shed light on the guardian's identity, or on the true history of the nexus point. Her phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "Hey, thinking of you. Still reeling from Sarah's passing. Want to grab coffee later this week? We should talk." Jessica stared at the message, a sudden chill running down her spine. Emily. Always present, always interested. Was it genuine concern or something more? The journal's warning about a trusted figure echoed in her mind. Paranoia was a luxury she couldn't afford, but caution was now her only friend. She pushed the thought aside for a moment. First, the nexus point. She needed to prepare. Not just mentally but physically. This wasn't a walk in the park. It was an expedition into the heart of a nightmare. She needed supplies, maps, a way to navigate the ancient woods, and perhaps something to defend herself with. The ancient presence might be ethereal, but its human agents wouldn't be. As she began to gather her things, a faint, almost imperceptible hum resonated through her apartment, a low thrum that seemed to vibrate not just in the air, but in her very bones. It was the ancient presence, no doubt, aware of her awakening, aware of her resolve. It was watching, waiting, and perhaps it was even amused. The game had truly begun, and Jessica, for the first time, felt a strange, unsettling blend of terror and exhilaration. She was no longer just a player, she was the last hope, and she would not be harvested. The loop, she vowed, would end with her. The old house, the one Sarah had lived in, the one that stood abandoned on the edge of town, suddenly called to her. It was where Sarah had spent her final desperate years, compiling her fractured truths. It was where Jessica needed to go next. There had to be more there. More clues, more warnings, more tools to fight back. Her journey into the heart of the terrifying truth had just begun, and the shadows of her bloodline stretched long behind her, urging her forward. The word America pulsed in her mind, a beacon in the terrifying fog of her family's past. It wasn't a name she recognized from any family tree, nor was it a place commonly associated with their small, sleepy town. Yet Rebecca's journal had highlighted it, a stark, desperate plea for understanding. Jessica knew with a chilling certainty that this wasn't a casual reference. It was a destination, a key. She plunged back into the research, the chilling revelations of Rebecca's journal fueling her frantic search. Her laptop screen glowed late into the night, illuminating maps, dusty historical documents digitized by the local library, and obscure genealogical records. The symbols from the journal became her compass, leading her down rabbit holes of forgotten lore and local legends. She cross-referenced the strange, intricate markings with old land deeds and town archives, searching for any connection. Days blurred into a single relentless quest. Coffee became her lifeblood, and the fear for Emily, her only remaining family, a constant thrum beneath her skin. Then late one night, as the digital clock on her screen ticked past 3 a.m., A fragmented piece of information surfaced. An old hand-drawn map, dated back to the late 1700s, showing the original land divisions of their town, had a small, almost imperceptible etching in the corner. It wasn't a name but a symbol, one of the less common ones from Rebecca's journal, marking an isolated patch of dense forest on the outskirts of what was then the fledgling settlement. Beneath it, in faded, elegant script, were the words, "The Cradle of America. The Cradle of America." It sounded like an ancient secret, a place where beginnings were forged. The description from the map indicated it was a forgotten territory, a section of woods never fully developed, bypassed by roads in progress, left to return to wilderness. Local legend vaguely spoke of an old hunting cabin, long abandoned, swallowed by the encroaching trees. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead she had. It had to be it. The very next morning, armed with a backpack containing a flashlight, a compass, and a healthy dose of dread, Jessica set out. The drive was short, but the journey into the woods felt like traversing centuries. She parked her car on a barely visible dirt track, the tires crunching over loose gravel, and stepped into the hushed ancient silence of the forest. The air immediately grew colder, heavier, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. The path was overgrown, choked with thorny brambles and thick undergrowth. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy, casting the forest floor in perpetual twilight. Every snapped twig, every rustle of leaves, sent a jolt of ice through her veins. She gripped the compass tightly, following the crude directions gleaned from the old map, pushing deeper into the woods, towards the forgotten cradle. After what felt like an eternity, the trees began to thin slightly, revealing a clearing. And there it was. Not a grand estate, not a hidden temple, but a ramshackle, dilapidated cabin, leaning precariously to one side. Its windows like vacant eyes staring out from beneath a shaggy brow of moss and tangled vines. The wood was rotted, the roof partially collapsed, and a skeletal chimney clawed at the gray sky. This was America. This was where it began. A shiver, colder than the forest air, ran down her spine. The cabin exuded an aura of profound sadness and, more disturbingly, a latent power. Hesitantly, Jessica approached, her boots crunching on fallen leaves and brittle twigs. The front door hung open, swinging slightly in an imperceptible breeze, groaning like a dying breath. She stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, decay, and something else. Something metallic and ancient, like old blood. Dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of light that pierced the gloom through cracks in the walls. The single room was empty, save for a collapsed table and a few broken chairs. Cobwebs draped like funeral shrouds from the ceiling, and the floorboards groaned under her weight. This couldn't be all there was. Rebecca's journal had warned of secrets, of hidden truths. Jessica ran her hands over the rough-hewn walls, searching, feeling for anything out of place. Her fingers brushed against a section of wall near the crumbling fireplace that felt different, slightly smoother, less weathered than the surrounding timber. She pressed, pushed, pulled. Nothing. Then she noticed it. A faint, almost invisible seam in the wood, running vertically, barely discernible beneath layers of grime and age. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She traced the line, pushing harder, searching for a latch, a handle. Her fingers found a small, almost microscopic indentation, a tiny carving of one of the symbols from Rebecca's journal. She pressed it, and with a soft click and a groan of ancient wood, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow, dark passage. A wave of fear, cold and absolute, washed over her. This was it. This was the heart of it. She took a deep, shaky breath, switched on her flashlight, and stepped into the unknown. The passage was short, leading to a small, earthen-floored chamber beneath the cabin. The air here was even heavier, charged with an almost palpable energy. In the center of the chamber, illuminated by her flashlight beam, was a crude wooden chest, bound with rusted iron straps. It looked like something from an old pirate movie, but far more sinister. On its lid, etched deeply into the wood, was the same intricate, spiraling symbol she had seen on the silver amulet in her grandmother's locket. With trembling hands, Jessica unlatched the chest. The hinges shrieked in protest as she lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded, brittle cloth, were several items. A bundle of yellowed letters tied with a fraying ribbon. A small, tarnished silver amulet, identical to her grandmother's, but with a new, more complex symbol incorporated into its design. And beneath it all, a small leather-bound book, even older than Rebecca's journal, its cover etched with the same spiraling symbol as the chest. She picked up the letters first, her fingers brushing over the delicate, cursive script. They were dated from the late 1700s, addressed to a dearest Abigail from a Thomas, her ancestor, the first in the bloodline. As she unfolded the first letter, the words seemed to leap off the page, filled with desperation and a chilling confession. Thomas wrote of a terrible plague sweeping through the fledgling settlement, claiming lives indiscriminately, sparing no family. His own children were falling ill, and his wife Abigail was wasting away. In his despair, he sought out the old ways, a local legend of an ancient entity dwelling in the cradle of America, a being capable of granting life and prosperity, but at a terrible cost. He had made a pact, a blood pact, to save his family, to ensure their prosperity and survival. He had promised an annual offering, the finest of his harvest, the strongest of his livestock. But the entity, Thomas wrote, demanded more. It demanded a blood offering from his own line, once every generation, to maintain the balance, to prevent the plague from returning, to ensure the continued prosperity of his descendants. The loop wasn't just a pattern of early deaths. It was a ritual, a generational sacrifice. If the offering was not made, the entity would reclaim what it was owed, in its own horrifying way. Jessica's breath hitched. The plague, the recurring misfortunes, the early deaths, it all clicked into place. The entity wasn't just causing bad luck. It was enforcing the pact, creating the conditions, the loop of despair and tragedy, until the blood offering was made. The victims weren't random. They were part of the entity's twisted mechanism for collecting its due. And the America was this very place, the site of the original pact, the altar for the blood offerings. She opened the leather-bound book next. It wasn't a journal, but a detailed account of the rituals, the symbols, the specific timing for the offering of renewal. It spoke of a hidden chamber deeper within the earth, beneath this very cabin, where the true power of the pact resided. A crude map drawn within its pages showed an underground passage, leading to a circular chamber marked with the most intricate symbol she had yet seen. A swirling vortex with a single central eye. As she absorbed the horrifying truth, a cold dread began to seep into the very marrow of her bones. The air in the chamber grew heavy, stagnant. The single candle she had lit flickered wildly, casting dancing shadows that seemed to writhe and stretch. A low, guttural whisper seemed to emanate from the very walls, a sound like dry leaves skittering across stone, subtly, menacingly calling her name. Jess Icie. Her heart leaped into her throat. It wasn't imagination. The sound was distinct, ancient, filled with an unimaginable hunger. The floorboards above her creaked, not with the settling of the old cabin, but with the distinct heavy tread of footsteps. Someone or something was walking directly above her. The entity, or perhaps one of its enforcers. She wasn't alone. She had disturbed something ancient and malevolent, and it was now fully aware of her presence. The loop had tightened its grip, and she was caught irrevocably in its coils. The air above her thickened, coalescing into an oppressive weight that pressed down, stealing her breath. It wasn't a physical form she could discern, not exactly, but a profound absence of light, a void that pulsed with an ancient, malevolent intelligence. A cold so absolute it burned seeped into her bones, paralyzing her. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to fight, but her limbs were lead, her voice a strangled whisper caught in her throat. This was not a dream, not a hallucination, but a stark, terrifying reality. The entity, or whatever grotesque fragment of it hovered just out of sight, was real, and it was here for her. A sound, not quite a voice, but a resonant hum that vibrated through her very cells, began to fill the cavern. It was a symphony of whispers, countless voices speaking at once, yet none distinguishable, each one a tendril of dread wrapping around her mind. They spoke of time, of repetition, of an endless cycle she was destined to join. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, desperately trying to block out the onslaught, but the sound was internal, a pressure behind her eyes, a thrumming in her skull. When she opened them again, the darkness above her had intensified, shaping itself into something more defined, though still formless, like the negative space of a colossal, predatory bird, wings spread wide. It didn't move, yet it was everywhere, its presence a suffocating blanket. Then a vision flooded her mind, unbidden, overwhelming. It wasn't her memory, but a torrent of images, sharp and brutal, flashing with impossible speed. She saw a woman, her face contorted in despair, clutching a tattered journal. The woman looked strikingly like Jessica, Emily's own grandmother, but older, her eyes hollowed by years of terror. The scene shifted. A man, his features blurring with speed, frantically digging in a moonlit field, unearthing something ancient and dark, a small, intricate box carved from obsidian. His hands trembled, his face a mask of fear. This wasn't Michael. This was someone else, someone from much further back in their lineage, perhaps the original architect of their family's suffering. The whispers grew louder, coalescing into a single guttural word that resonated with unimaginable power. Oti. Emily gasped, a ragged sound that tore from her chest. The images continued, each one a shard of a forgotten past. She saw the obsidian box being opened, a faint, sickly green light emanating from within. A group of figures, cloaked and hooded, gathered around it, their faces obscured by shadow, their hands raised in a ritualistic gesture. They spoke in a language that wasn't human, a series of clicks and hisses that sent shivers down her spine. A contract, a pact, a desperate plea for power, for protection, for something they clearly didn't understand. And the price? The bloodline. Their descendants, forever bound, forever feeding the very thing they sought to control. The entity was showing her the origin, the true beginning of the loop. Tears streamed down Emily's face, not from sorrow, but from the sheer, overwhelming horror of the revelation. Her ancestors hadn't just found a cursed artifact, they had invoked something. They had made a deal, and the generations that followed were paying the interest. The loop wasn't just a pattern of unfortunate events. It was a hungry, sentient entity, feeding on the fear, the despair, the very life force of the descendants of those who had dared to awaken it. A sudden sharp pain pierced her temple, as if a needle had been driven directly into her brain. The whispers intensified, morphing into a cacophony of accusatory voices. You sought understanding. You unearthed truth. You disturbed the slumber. Now you belong. Emily stumbled back, her hand flying to her head. The pain was excruciating, threatening to shatter her consciousness. She could feel the entity trying to burrow into her mind, not just showing her visions but attempting to take root, to possess her. She fought back with every fiber of her being, her scientific mind, though reeling, desperately trying to find a logical anchor. This was energy. This was a force. Could be resisted. No! She screamed, her voice hoarse, a fragile defiance against an ancient power. You won't have me. She closed her eyes again, picturing her family, Michael, David, even Jessica, whose memory now felt tainted by this horrifying truth. She imagined a wall, a shield of pure, unadulterated will, pushing back against the mental assault. The pain lessened slightly, a momentary reprieve that gave her a sliver of hope. It was working. Her resilience, her refusal to break, was a weapon. The entity seemed to recoil, its oppressive presence wavering for a fraction of a second. The whispers became more agitated, less coherent, as if her resistance was an unexpected anomaly. But then a new image flashed into her mind, one that chilled her to the bone. It was Michael. He was older, his face etched with lines of profound weariness, his eyes filled with a familiar despair. He was in a library surrounded by old books, a frantic energy about him. He clutched a map, one that looked eerily similar to the one Emily had found in their family home, but this one was covered in new annotations, frantic scribbles. His lips moved, speaking a name she couldn't quite hear, but the desperation in his gaze was palpable. He was searching. He was still caught in the loop even decades from now. The vision was a taunt, a glimpse into her own potential future, a future where her efforts were futile, where the loop always won. The entity wanted her to believe there was no escape. It wanted her to surrender to the inevitable. But then another image, fleeting, almost imperceptible, flickered at the edge of the vision. Michael wasn't alone. A younger woman, her face obscured by shadow, stood beside him. She held a small, glowing object, something that radiated a faint, warm light, a stark contrast to the sickly green of the obsidian box. Could it be a key? A counter-artifact? A symbol of hope? Before Emily could fully process it, the vision dissolved, replaced by the suffocating darkness. The entity was testing her, playing with her mind. It was showing her a future of despair, but also a glimpse of a potential alternative, a path Michael might find. It was a psychological war, and Emily was fighting on all fronts. She had to get out. She had to take the information she had just been force-fed and share it. The origin of the loop, the pact, the obsidian box. These were critical pieces of the puzzle. This wasn't just a cursed bloodline, it was a debt, a contract that needed to be severed. Summoning a strength she didn't know she possessed, Emily pushed against the suffocating pressure. Her muscles screamed in protest, but she forced her legs to move, one agonizing step after another. She couldn't see anything in the oppressive darkness, but she could feel the cold, damp stone walls of the cavern. She had to find the entrance, the way back to the surface, back to the light. The entity's presence pulsed around her, a furious storm of dark energy. It was angry. Her defiance was an affront. The whispers turned into a deafening roar, a sound that threatened to tear her eardrums. It felt as though invisible hands were clawing at her, pulling her back, trying to drag her deeper into the abyss. "You cannot escape your destiny," the whisper shrieked, now sounding like 1,000 tormented souls. "The bloodline is bound. The loop demands its due." Emily stumbled, falling to her knees on the cold, jagged rock. Her hands scraped against the rough surface, drawing blood, but she barely registered the pain. Her mind was a battlefield, her will clashing against an ancient, malevolent force. She was so close to breaking, so close to succumbing to the overwhelming despair that threatened to consume her. But then a single clear thought pierced through the mental fog: Michael. He was still out there, possibly still searching, still fighting. And the image of the younger woman with the glowing object, a potential ally, a future hope. She couldn't give up. Not now. Not when she held the key to understanding the truth of their family's curse. With a primal scream that echoed through the cavern, Emily pushed herself back to her feet. She lashed out blindly, not at the entity, but at the oppressive darkness itself, a desperate, symbolic act of defiance. The air crackled around her, a wave of energy pushing back. The entity was powerful, but it was not omnipotent. Her will, her sheer refusal to surrender, was a force it hadn't accounted for. She turned and ran, not knowing where she was going, but driven by a singular, desperate need to escape. The cavern seemed to stretch infinitely before her, a labyrinth of shadows and despair. But somewhere she knew there was an exit. There had to be. She was not just running from a monster. She was running for the future of her entire bloodline. The loop had tightened its grip, yes, but for the first time, Emily felt a flicker of understanding, a fragile hope that if they knew the truth, they might just find a way to sever the ancient, terrible pact. The entity roared behind her, a sound of pure, unadulterated fury. It had been disturbed, revealed, and it would not let its secrets or its prey escape so easily. The air vibrated, thick with a malice that curdled the blood. Sarah stumbled back, the ancient journal clutched to her chest, its pages now feeling scorching hot against her skin. The roar was not just sound but a physical force, a wave of pure, concentrated hatred that slammed into her, stealing her breath. Michael, his face pale and grim, yanked her arm, pulling her away from the gaping maw of shadow that now pulsed where the wall had been. The entity was no longer a whisper in the periphery. It was a hungry, enraged presence, its formless mass churning in the dim light, tendrils of darkness lashing out like whips. "It knows," Sarah gasped, her voice raw with terror, but also a strange, defiant clarity. "It knows we saw it. Run." Michael didn't need to be told twice. He dragged her through the hidden passage, the narrow tunnel barely wide enough for them both, the roar echoing behind them, growing louder, closer. Dust and ancient debris showered down as the very foundations of the house seemed to tremble under the entity's wrath. Every instinct screamed at them to flee, to escape the suffocating presence that now filled the space they had just vacated. They scrambled through the labyrinthine passages Michael had uncovered, a forgotten network of service tunnels and secret rooms that snaked beneath the main house. The journal, heavy in Sarah's hands, was a beacon of both terror and hope. Its brittle pages held the truth, a truth that now felt like a death sentence. They burst into a small, windowless chamber, barely larger than a closet, tucked away behind a loose stone in the cellar. Michael slammed the heavy stone back into place, plunging them into near-total darkness. Only the faint, flickering glow of Sarah's phone provided any illumination. The muffled thudding and grating sounds from beyond the wall told them the entity was pressing against their makeshift barrier, its fury palpable even through solid stone. They could feel the vibrations in the floor, in their very bones. "What did you see, Sarah?" Michael's voice was a strained whisper, his eyes wide, reflecting the phone's light. "What did it say?" Sarah leaned against the rough stone wall, her lungs burning, heart hammering against her ribs. It wasn't words. Not like we speak. It was pure intent, pure hunger. And it was old, Michael. So old. She took a ragged breath, the adrenaline coursing through her. The journal. It wasn't just about the loop. It was about her. Eleanor Vance. Michael frowned, trying to place the name. Our ancestor? The one from the late 1800s. Yes, she was the one. The architect of our damnation, or rather, the desperate soul who opened the door. Sarah flipped through the journal, her fingers trembling over the faded script. The Vance family was on the brink of ruin. A blight on their crops, illness sweeping through the children, debts piling up. Eleanor, a woman of fierce will and even fiercer love for her family, sought any means to save them. She found a way. A desperate, forbidden pact. The scraping and groaning from outside intensified. A low guttural growl vibrating through the stone. It sounded like something immense was trying to force its way through. She made a deal, Sarah continued, speaking faster, her voice hushed but urgent. Not with a demon, not in the traditional sense, but with an entity that exists between realms. A parasitic echo. It feeds on despair, on the fear of loss, on the acceptance of inevitability. It promised to restore the Vance fortune, to bring health and prosperity back to them. And it did. For a time. What was the price? Michael knew in his gut before she even said it. The bloodline. Not just a single life, Michael. That's what we always thought. A death every generation. But it's far worse. It demands a piece of each generation. One soul drawn into its realm, to be perpetually consumed, to fuel its existence. Not just killed but trapped. Forever. Its energy, its essence, its fear becomes its sustenance. That's the loop. That's why they disappear, why they're found gone mad or lost to the wilderness. They're not dead. They're imprisoned, drained, perpetually feeding this thing. Michael stared at her, horror dawning in his eyes. My father, David. My grandfather, Robert. They're not just gone. They're still out there somewhere being tormented. Sarah nodded, her own eyes glistening with unshed tears. And so many others. Generations of Vances. Eleanor thought she was saving them. She thought the cost was a single clean death. But the entity twisted her intentions. It thrives on the slow, agonizing siphon of life force, the constant renewal of fear and despair from each new victim. But why us? Michael asked, his voice barely audible. Why now? The pact has a trigger, Sarah explained, pointing to a passage in the journal. It's tied to the family's prosperity, to their complacency. When the Vances grew too comfortable, too successful, too forgetful of the darkness that founded their wealth, the entity would reach out and claim its due. It was a recurring reminder, a ritual of fear to ensure its continued feeding. But there's more. Eleanor, in her dying days, realized the monstrous truth. She saw the entity's true nature, heard the whispers of the trapped souls. She tried to find a way to break it, to sever the pact. The wall shuddered violently, a crack appearing in the stone. A cold, fetid draft seeped through, carrying with it the scent of decay and ancient iron. The entity was growing impatient. She wrote about a counter-ritual, Sarah whispered, her voice quickening. A way to break the cycle. Not to destroy the entity, she believed that impossible, but to starve it. To refuse it its sustenance. To reclaim the trapped souls. It requires a specific act of defiance, a rejection of its claim, performed at the nexus of its power. The place where the original pact was made. Where is that? Michael asked, his gaze darting around the small, oppressive room. It's not in the house, not entirely, Sarah said, pointing to a crude map sketched in the journal. It's beneath the house. A chamber, hidden even from the original builders. A convergence point of ancient ley lines that Eleanor, in her desperation, inadvertently tapped into when she made the pact. She called it the heart of the pact. It's where the entity anchors itself to our reality. How do we get there? Michael asked, his hand instinctively going to a loose brick in the wall, checking for another hidden passage. Through the old crypt, Sarah replied, tracing a line on the map. It's sealed, but the journal describes a mechanism, a series of ancient gears, hidden within the original family tomb. It's the only direct path, and it needs to be done when the veil between worlds is thinnest. The journal mentions a specific alignment, A celestial event that happens only once every few decades. A window of opportunity. Sarah looked up, her eyes meeting Michael's. Michael, the journal dates it precisely. Tonight. The alignment is happening now. We have to go. We have to sever it. If we don't, we're next. Or worse, we become another link in the chain. Another source of its eternal hunger. The crack in the wall widened, a sliver of pulsing blackness visible through the gap. A low, sibilant whisper like 1,000 dying breaths slithered into the chamber, a chilling promise of eternal suffering. The entity was not just trying to break through, it was trying to break them. It knows we're trying to stop it, Michael said, his jaw set. It feels its food source slipping away. He pulled out his phone, shining the light on the map Sarah held. The crypt. I know that area. There's a section of the basement that's always felt wrong. Colder, quieter. I always thought it was structural, but it must be where the crypt entrance is. The journal says the mechanism to open it is hidden behind the oldest family sarcophagus, the one belonging to Elias Vance, Eleanor's father, Sarah explained, her voice firm despite the terror. It's a complex lock requiring a specific sequence of movements, a test of will and knowledge of the family's true history. Michael nodded, a grim determination replacing his fear. Then that's where we go. If this thing wants to stop us, it's going to have to catch us first. He pushed open the loose stone they had used to seal themselves in, peering out into the shadowed passage. The immediate area was clear, but the air thrummed with the entity's presence, a suffocating weight that pressed down on them. It was hunting them, not just with brute force, but with an insidious psychological assault, whispering doubts, conjuring fleeting shadows that mimicked their trapped ancestors. They moved quickly, silently through the winding, dusty tunnels, the phone's beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of unseen vermin, sent jolts of pure terror through them. They knew the entity was all around them, a formless predator playing a deadly game of cat and mouse. It was trying to herd them, to break their resolve, to make them give up before they even reached their destination. Sarah clutched the journal, its weight a constant reminder of the terrible burden placed upon their shoulders. The fate of generations, past and future, rested on their ability to face this ancient horror and sever the twisted pact. The whispers intensified, carrying the echoes of familiar voices, Michael's father, Sarah's grandmother, all pleading, all in agony. It was a desperate attempt to break their focus, to drown them in despair. Don't listen to it, Sarah urged, her voice trembling but resolute. It's a trick. It wants us to give up hope. They reached the section of the basement Michael had mentioned, a vast, cavernous space where the air hung heavy and still. The oppressive silence here was more terrifying than the entity's roar. In the center, beneath a crumbling archway, stood the Vance family crypt, a massive, ornate stone structure, its entrance sealed by a heavy iron-bound door. Faded names and dates were carved into the worn stone, a silent testament to the many lives that had passed through this place. This is it, Michael breathed, his voice barely audible. The crypt. The entity's presence was overwhelming here, a cold, suffocating blanket that pressed down on them, stealing the oxygen from their lungs. It knew they were at the threshold. It would not let them pass. The ancient stones of the crypt seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, and from within, they could hear a faint rhythmic thrumming, like a vast unseen heart beating deep beneath the earth. The heart of the pact. Sarah gripped Michael's arm, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and grim determination. We have to be careful. The journal warns that the entity's influence is strongest here. It will fight us every step of the way. As they approached the crypt entrance, the shadows around them seemed to deepen, to coalesce. From the corners of their vision, fleeting forms flickered, gaunt, spectral figures, their faces contorted in silent screams. The trapped souls. The entity's eternal sustenance. They were a chilling warning, a horrifying glimpse of the fate that awaited anyone who dared to challenge the ancient pact. The air grew impossibly cold, and a low guttural growl vibrated from within the crypt itself, a clear message. They were trespassing on its sacred ground, and it would not allow its feast to be disturbed. Their final stand was about to begin. The guttural growl didn't just vibrate through the stone. It resonated deep within their bones, a primal hum that threatened to unravel their very sanity. It was the sound of ancient wrath, a warning that echoed the chilling words from the journal about the devouring presence. The torches, clutched in their trembling hands, flickered violently, casting erratic shadows that danced like specters on the crypt walls, making the grotesque carvings seem to writhe. Michael felt a paralyzing dread seize him, a cold hand gripping his heart. His breath hitched in his throat, and he instinctively took a step back, bumping into Jessica. She gasped, her eyes wide with a terror that mirrored his own. David, usually the picture of stoicism, looked utterly unnerved, his knuckles white as he tightened his grip on his torch, its flame the only beacon against the encroaching darkness. Then, from the deepest recesses of the crypt, beyond the crumbling sarcophagi and the scattered bones, an oppressive weight began to press in. It wasn't a physical force but a psychological one, a crushing presence that stole the air from their lungs and silence from their lips. The cold intensified, piercing through their clothes, a frigid embrace that felt less like temperature and more like the touch of death itself. It tasted of dust and decay, of something impossibly old and malevolent. A low whispering hum began to fill the space, a sound that seemed to originate from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was a cacophony of unheard voices, a chorus of forgotten screams and dying breaths, twisting together into a single agonizing drone. It burrowed into their minds, scratching at the edges of their sanity, threatening to pull them apart from the inside out. It's here," Jessica choked out, her voice barely a whisper against the rising hum. Her eyes darted around, searching for a source, a tangible form, but there was nothing. Only the overwhelming presence, the crushing weight, and the soul-shattering cold. Michael, fighting against the paralyzing fear, forced himself to move. He stumbled forward, his torch held aloft, trying to pierce the gloom. "What is it? What do you want?" he demanded, his voice cracking, but he needed to speak, to fight back against the silent assault. The whispering intensified around him, swirling like a vortex, and for a fleeting moment, he felt a sharp, piercing pain behind his eyes, as if 1,000 needles were pricking his brain. Images flashed before his mind's eye. A shadowy figure standing over a prone form, a gnarled hand reaching out, a pool of crimson seeping into ancient stone. It was disjointed, horrifying, and utterly disorienting. Jessica, clutching her great-grandmother's journal to her chest, pointed a trembling finger towards the far end of the crypt, where the stone floor seemed to dip slightly, forming a shallow basin. "The feast," she whispered, her voice laced with dawning horror. "The ritual, the basin, that's where the blood was spilled. That's where it fed." As she spoke, a faint, sickly luminescence began to emanate from the ancient stone basin. A soft, pulsating crimson glow that made the shadows deepen and writhe. It was a color that spoke of sacrifice, of life force drained and consumed. The whispering grew louder, more distinct, as if the entity itself was drawing strength from their fear, coalescing its power around that ancient point of ritual. David, who had been staring wide-eyed at the glowing basin, suddenly cried out, a guttural sound of agony. He clutched his head, his torch clattering to the ground, extinguished in an instant. "My head! It's screaming!" he yelled, collapsing to his knees, his body racked with unseen torment. Michael rushed to his side, dropping his own torch to grab David's shoulders. "David, what's happening?" But David couldn't answer. He was convulsing, his eyes rolled back, and a thin stream of blood began to trickle from his nose. The whispering voices seemed to be screaming directly into his ears, tearing at his mind. It was a direct assault, a targeted strike designed to break them. Jessica, though visibly terrified, forced herself to open the journal, her fingers fumbling through the brittle pages. The journal says it feeds on despair, on fear, on the very essence of their life force. It doesn't just want blood, Michael, it wants their will. Her eyes scanned the text frantically, her voice rising in pitch as she found what she was looking for. It says the bloodline is bound to it, an offering, a continuous cycle. It drains them, leaving them empty husks, trapped in a loop of suffering. As she spoke, the crimson glow in the basin intensified, mirroring the trickle of blood from David's nose. A faint ethereal mist began to rise from the basin, swirling and coalescing, not quite forming a shape, but creating an undeniable sense of presence, a hungry, waiting entity. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of old iron and something else, something metallic and sweet, like fresh blood. Michael felt a surge of adrenaline, overriding his fear. David was fading, being consumed before his very eyes. This wasn't just a ghost story anymore. This was real, a monstrous entity actively preying on his friend. He looked at Jessica, his mind racing. How do we stop it? "The journal, Jessica. What does it say?" Jessica's eyes darted between David's convulsing form and the glowing basin, her face pale with horror. "It speaks of a counter-ritual, a way to sever the tie, to break the loop. But it requires a sacrifice of will, a choice, and something else. Something that binds the bloodline." She pointed to a section of the text, her finger trembling. "It says the original pact was made with a physical token, a symbol of the family's submission. It needs to be destroyed, broken, to sever the connection." The whispering voices, which had been focused on David, now seemed to turn their attention to Michael and Jessica, swirling around them, probing their minds, seeking their fears. Michael felt a sudden irrational terror of being alone, of being lost in a vast empty void. Jessica flinched, her eyes wide as if seeing something horrifying that wasn't there. The entity was trying to break them, to shatter their resolve, to make them easy prey. He forced himself to focus, to push through the psychological assault. A token? What kind of token? Jessica frantically flipped through the pages. It's not explicitly stated, but it talks about a symbol of eternal devotion, a mark of the pact. Something that has been passed down, hidden in plain sight, perhaps? A family heirloom. Her eyes widened as a terrifying realization dawned on her. The locket. The one great-grandma Eleanor always wore. The one she gave to Michael's mother, then to him. The one with the family crest. Michael's blood ran cold. The locket. The one he always wore. A sentimental piece. A connection to his family. It was in his pocket, a comforting weight he'd carried for years. It was the very item he believed held the key to his family's history, not its damnation. As if sensing their discovery, the entity's presence surged. The crimson glow in the basin pulsed violently, and the ethereal mist began to solidify, forming vague, tendril-like extensions that stretched out, reaching towards them, towards David. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of ozone and decay, and the stone walls of the crypt seemed to groan under an immense, unseen pressure. David let out a final, agonizing gasp, and then his body went limp, his eyes staring blankly at the crypt ceiling. The blood from his nose ceased, and his skin took on a ghostly pallor. He was still, utterly still. The whispering voices around him quieted, as if their work was done, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. "David!" Michael cried out, shaking his friend, but there was no response. The life, the spark, the will, it was gone. Drained. Consumed. Jessica, tears streaming down her face, pointed a trembling finger at the locket, still clutched in Michael's hand. "It's the locket, Michael. It's the conduit. It's what binds your bloodline to this thing." Her voice hitched with a sob. "We have to destroy it. Now." The crimson mist from the basin, sensing its prize, began to move with terrifying speed, coalescing into a more defined, though still formless mass drawing closer to them. It was a swirling vortex of shadow and dark energy, its hunger palpable, its ancient eyes unseen but felt. It was coming for them, for Michael, for the final piece of the ritual, the breaking of the loop or the perpetuation of its feast. Michael looked at the locket in his hand, then at David's lifeless form, then at the approaching entity. His great-grandmother's words echoed in his mind. Some connections are not blessings, Michael. Some are chains. The locket wasn't a connection. It was a chain, a dark conduit that had ensnared his family for generations, feeding this ancient horror. He knew what he had to do. He had to break the chain, sever the bloodline, even if it meant destroying the last tangible link to his ancestry. But how? How could he destroy something that felt like it was humming with malevolent energy, within the very heart of the entity's domain? The overwhelming presence of the entity was now upon them, its icy tendrils reaching out, seeking to crush their will, to make them another offering in its endless feast. Their final chance, their only hope, lay in that cursed locket, and they had mere seconds before the ancient horror consumed them all. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and the metallic tang of fear. The tendrils, now visible as shimmering, ghostly coils of frigid energy, lashed out, whipping past Michael's face, freezing the sweat on David's brow. Sarah, eyes wide with a terror that mirrored the ancient cold gripping her heart, fumbled at the chain around her neck. Her fingers, numb with dread, wrestled with the clasp of the locket. Each tick of the grandfather clock in the distance, a sound that usually brought comfort, now hammered like a death knell in her ears. The entity's presence solidified. It wasn't just a chill or a shadow anymore. It was a crushing weight, an invisible predator coiling around them, its intent palpable, its hunger absolute. Michael cried out as one of the icy tendrils grazed his arm, leaving a frost-kissed mark on his skin that burned with an internal cold. David roared, shoving Michael behind him, a futile act of defiance against a force that defied all physical laws. Sarah finally tore the locket free, its cold silver burning against her palm. It was heavier than it looked, pulsing faintly, almost imperceptibly, with a soft inner light. "It has to be this," she gasped, her voice hoarse, barely audible over the rising hum of the entity. She didn't know what to do with it, what power it held. Instinct, a whisper from generations long past, guided her. Her thumb found a tiny, almost invisible seam on its side. With a desperate prayer, she pressed. The locket didn't just open. It unfolded, not into two halves, but into a complex, intricate mandala of silver and obsidian. From its center, a blinding white light erupted, not outward but inward, pulling at the very fabric of the room of their perception. The icy tendrils recoiled, hissing, a sound like dry ice on hot metal, as if the light was anathema to their very being. The crushing weight momentarily lifted, replaced by an overwhelming sense of vertigo. Michael fell to his knees, clutching his head. David stumbled back, shielding his eyes. Sarah felt herself being pulled, not physically but spiritually. The world around them dissolved, the familiar living room melting into a swirling vortex of color and sound. They were no longer in their home, but in a space beyond space, a moment beyond time. The locket, now floating before her, pulsed with an almost painful intensity, acting as a beacon, a conduit. Images flashed, not like a dream, but with the visceral clarity of lived experience. A young woman, strikingly similar to Sarah, her eyes wide with fear, clutching a baby to her chest. Her name was Abigail. She was their ancestor from centuries ago, in a time of plague and famine. Abigail, desperate, had made a bargain, not with a devil but with something far older, far more insidious. A presence that had offered salvation from the blight that was consuming her village, her family, in exchange for not her soul but her bloodline. The vision deepened, becoming a shared memory. They stood with Abigail in a desolate clearing, the air thick with the stench of death. Before her, a shimmering distortion in the air, a tear in reality, pulsed with a dark, oily light. This was the ancient horror, not a monster with teeth and claws, but a primordial hunger, a void given sentience. It promised to spare her child, to lift the curse from her people, if she would simply tether them to it. Not as slaves, but as a perpetual source of sustenance. It fed on the emotional resonance of despair, the fear of loss, the grief of generations. It didn't want their lives, not directly. It wanted their suffering. Abigail, blinded by love and terror, agreed. She crafted the locket, not knowing its true purpose. It was a binding agent, a focal point for the agreement, infused with a drop of her blood, cementing the pact. The entity had then shown her a glimpse of the future, a twisted mirroring of her choices. Her descendants would live, yes, but they would forever walk a tightrope of tragedy, always on the brink, always experiencing the cyclical despair that fueled the entity. The loop was not just a series of unfortunate events, but a curated generational suffering, painstakingly orchestrated to ripen the bloodline for its endless feast. It was a farm and they were the crops. The vision flickered, showing the subsequent generations. A young man named Thomas, losing his fortune and his family to a sudden illness, his grief a potent offering. A woman named Eleanor, betrayed by her husband and cast out, her heartbreak a bitter wine for the entity. Each life a carefully cultivated tragedy, each despair a feast. And then their own lives. The escalating tension in their family, the sudden inexplicable misfortunes, the growing sense of dread that had plagued them for years. It wasn't coincidence. It was design. The locket had been passed down, a silent, potent heirloom, each generation unknowingly carrying the key to their own torment, or perhaps their salvation. It had been sealed for centuries, its true nature forgotten, until Sarah's desperate research, until David's unwavering belief in the family's strange history had brought them here. The visions accelerated, a dizzying montage of suffering, each face a distant echo of their own. They saw the exact moment of their grandfather's accident, his final despairing breath, the crushing weight of their grandmother's loneliness after, the subtle manipulations that had led to their parents' constant arguments, the slow erosion of their joy. Every instance of heartbreak, every moment of fear, every instance of loss was a vibration, a frequency that the entity absorbed, growing stronger, more defined. The realization hit them like a physical blow. The entity didn't kill them outright because dead prey couldn't suffer. It needed them alive, tormented, forever trapped in a cycle of near escape and inevitable doom, only to be consumed at the peak of their despair. Their bloodline wasn't cursed, it was farmed. The locket wasn't just a key, it was a record, a testament, and perhaps a weapon. As the final horrifying truth of the loop slammed into their consciousness, the entity, which had been momentarily stunned by the locket's light, roared. It was a sound that tore through their very souls, a primal shriek of fury and desperation. The shimmering vortex of the vision began to collapse, the ancient scenes dissolving back into the familiar, yet now terrifying living room. The entity was there, fully manifest now, no longer just tendrils, but a vast shadowy form, a gaping maw of pure darkness, studded with pinpricks of icy light that seemed to be the frozen eyes of 1,000 generations of suffering. It was furious, its spectral claws reaching for the locket, for Sarah, for the knowledge that had just been unleashed. They had seen the truth. They understood the loop. But the entity was no longer just feeding. It was enraged, threatened by their newfound awareness, and it intended to silence them, to consume them utterly, before they could even begin to comprehend how to break free. The locket pulsed in Sarah's hand, now radiating not just light, but a searing heat. The choice, the impossible choice of what to do next, was theirs, and the ancient horror was almost upon them. The locket pulsed in Sarah's hand, now radiating not just light, but a searing heat. The choice, the impossible choice of what to do next, was theirs, and the ancient horror was almost upon them. The air grew heavy, thick with a cold dread that clung to their skin like icy mist. Shadows in the corners of the cavern deepened, twisting into grotesque, fleeting shapes. A low guttural hum vibrated through the very rock beneath their feet, rising in pitch until it was a piercing, silent scream inside their minds. Michael stumbled, clutching his head, his eyes wide with an unseen terror. Jessica whimpered, pulling Emily closer, her gaze fixed on the shifting darkness at the cavern's mouth. This wasn't a beast of flesh and blood. It was something far more ancient, a predator of the spirit, a devourer of hope itself. The locket in Sarah's palm flared, the light intensifying until it was blinding, pushing back the encroaching shadows with a palpable force. But the heat was unbearable, scorching her skin, yet she couldn't let go. As the light pulsed, visions slammed into her mind, a kaleidoscope of desperate faces, all familiar, yet unknown. She saw ancestors, generations of her bloodline, their eyes mirroring the same terror, the same impossible choice. A young woman centuries ago, standing before a similar encroaching darkness, a locket clutched in her hand, her face contorted in agony as she made a terrible sacrifice to save her child. A man 100 years later, offering his own life, a silent plea for his family's survival. Each vision was a fractured piece of the same horrifying puzzle. The loop. It wasn't just about the recurring tragedies, the sudden deaths, the unexplained disappearances. It was about this moment, this precise, agonizing decision. The ancient horror didn't just kill. It fed. It fed on the despair, on the fear, on the energy of sacrifice that each generation offered in a desperate attempt to break free. Each time an ancestor chose to give something up, to make the impossible choice they believed would save others, they inadvertently nourished the very entity that cursed them, strengthening its hold, ensuring its return. The locket passed down through the generations wasn't just a family heirloom. It was a conduit, a record, and perhaps a trap. It promised protection, but it had also been the instrument of their recurring doom, guiding each ancestor to the same flawed solution. The entity's presence solidified, not into a physical form, but a swirling vortex of pure, concentrated darkness directly before them. It wasn't a monster with teeth and claws, but a gaping void that threatened to swallow not just their bodies, but their very souls, their memories, their lineage. It reached out, not with tendrils, but with a silent, consuming hunger that drew the warmth from the air, the color from their surroundings, the hope from their hearts. "It wants us to choose," Sarah choked out, the words burning on her tongue, the locket vibrating violently. "It wants us to sacrifice, to give it something. That's how it feeds. That's the loop." Michael, still reeling, looked at her, then at Jessica and Emily, understanding dawning in his terrified eyes. "So we don't offer anything?" If we offer anything, even ourselves, we feed it, Sarah whispered, her voice raw with the weight of the revelation. We perpetuate the cycle. The locket showed me. Every ancestor who sacrificed, they thought they were breaking the curse. But they were just buying time and strengthening it for the next generation. The vortex pulsed, a silent command echoing in their minds. Asterisk offer. Choose. Sustain. Asterisk it was a demand for their despair, for their selflessness twisted into a feeding ground. It was the ultimate psychological weapon, forcing them to believe their only path to salvation was through an act that would ultimately damn them all. What's the alternative? Jessica cried, her voice trembling. It's right here. It's going to take us all. Sarah looked at her family, her bloodline. Michael, her steadfast partner. Jessica, her fierce protective sister. Emily, the innocent child, the future. The locket grew hotter, searing her palm, and another flash of insight hit her. The locket wasn't just a record. It was a focal point. It contained the accumulated energy of all those past sacrifices, all that fear, all that desperate love. It was a battery for the entity, charged by their ancestors' well-intentioned but ultimately misguided choices. We don't fight it with sacrifice, Sarah declared, her voice gaining strength, cutting through the encroaching dread. We fight it with refusal, with unity, with love. The words felt inadequate, almost foolish, against the overwhelming horror of the void before them. But in that moment, as the locket burned, Sarah understood. The entity fed on division, on the fear that forced one to choose between loved ones. It fed on the absence of hope. Michael, Jessica, Sarah urged, her eyes locking with theirs. Hold hands. All of us. Hesitantly, fear still etched on their faces, Michael reached for Jessica's hand. Jessica, trembling, grasped Emily's small hand, then Michael's. Sarah extended her free hand, and Michael took it, completing the circle. A faint golden warmth spread through their linked hands, a stark contrast to the oppressive cold radiating from the void. The locket, it's been collecting all our family's fear and pain, Sarah explained, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hand. But it also holds our love, our resilience, the things that kept us going even through the darkest times. We have to give that to the locket. Not sacrifice, not despair, but strength. She closed her eyes, focusing all her will, all her love for her family, all the stories of survival and perseverance passed down through their bloodline, into the locket. She thought of her grandmother's quiet strength, her father's unwavering optimism, her mother's boundless affection. She thought of Michael's steady presence, Jessica's protective fire, Emily's innocent joy. The locket flared again, but this time the light was different. It wasn't just bright. It was warm, radiating a profound sense of peace and belonging. The searing heat subsided, replaced by a gentle thrum. The visions in Sarah's mind shifted, no longer showing desperate sacrifices, but moments of quiet courage, of shared laughter, of hands held tight against adversity. The true legacy of their bloodline wasn't just the curse, but the unbreakable bond that had always fought against it. The swirling void of the ancient horror recoiled, a faint, almost imperceptible shriek echoing in the psychic space of their minds. It was a sound of frustration, of starvation. It had expected fear, division, a willing offering. Instead, it was met with an unyielding wall of collective love and resolute refusal. Sarah opened her eyes. The locket was no longer just shining. It was humming with a soft, golden glow, pulsing in sync with her own heartbeat. She looked at the void, which was now noticeably weaker, its edges blurring, its hunger less potent. We refuse, Sarah stated, her voice clear and strong, resonating with a power she hadn't known she possessed. We refuse to feed you our fear. We refuse to sacrifice our own. Our bloodline is bound by love, not by your curse. As she spoke, she raised the locket, not as a weapon but as a shield, a beacon. The golden light intensified, not violently but steadily, pushing back against the encroaching darkness. The cold receded, the oppressive hum faded, the shadowy figures in the cavern corners dissolved. The ancient horror, deprived of its expected meal, of the very energy it had sustained itself on for centuries, could not hold its form. With a final silent gasp of thwarted hunger, the swirling vortex shuddered, then collapsed inward, dissipating into nothingness, leaving behind only the cold, still air of the cavern. Silence. Profound, absolute silence. They stood there, hands still linked, breathing heavily, the adrenaline slowly draining from their bodies. The locket in Sarah's hand continued to glow softly, a gentle warmth no longer searing. It felt different now, lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted from its ancient core. "It's gone," Michael whispered, his voice hoarse, disbelief warring with relief. Sarah looked at the spot where the void had been, then at her family. "It's gone. For now. We broke the cycle. Not by destroying it, but by refusing to play its game. By choosing a different path." The walk back out of the cavern was surreal. The world outside seemed brighter, the air cleaner, the forest sounds more vibrant. They emerged into the late afternoon sun, eyes blinking against the sudden brilliance. The old house stood silent, unchanged, but everything felt different. The oppressive weight that had hung over their bloodline for generations had lifted. Back inside, Sarah examined the locket. It was still warm, still faintly glowing. It was no longer a symbol of dread, but a testament to their strength, to the power of their unity. The images of sacrifice were replaced by a quiet sense of enduring love, woven into its very fabric. The loop, the one that had trapped their bloodline, was broken. They had not escaped their bloodline itself. That was impossible. But they had escaped the curse of it, the endless cycle of fear and sacrifice. They were free to live, not with the shadow of an ancient horror dictating their choices, but with the knowledge that their love was a shield, their unity an unbreakable force. Yet a subtle chill remained. The memory of the void, the echo of its hunger, lingered in the quiet spaces of their minds. They understood now that true escape wasn't about eradicating evil, but about refusing to let it define them. The bloodline was forever marked, forever aware of the darkness that had once preyed upon it. The locket, now a guardian rather than a trap, was a constant reminder. They had found their way out of the loop, not by running but by facing it, understanding it, and ultimately by choosing a different ending. The burden was lifted, but the vigilance would remain. For the bloodline that couldn't escape the loop had finally learned how to live within it, on their own terms. And that, in itself, was a new, profound kind of freedom.